So, Martin, Brazil has a new president. Markets love him. Yeah, he's a far-right populist. How does this work? Well, I suppose you've seen this before somewhere, but what's going on?
Well, markets do indeed love him, but the question can legitimately be asked whether he's quite such a sure bet as the enthusiasm of some investors would suggest.
Yeah.
And I think there are three bets being made here on him. Firstly, that his relatively recent conversion to free market economics is in fact something that's going to stick. There are other factors in the administration.
Yeah, I mean, let's just go there. So the new president elected yesterday on Sunday, Jair Bolsonaro. I'm going to butcher that name, obviously.
Jair Bolsonaro, I believe it is. Yes.
You're right. I mean, he's basically an economic nationalist until about a few weeks ago.
That's been his career in Congress. Largely has been that way, and he's an ex-army man, and he's got various other ex-army people in his team, and they're
going to want certain things that one would assume.
Well, there's the view that oil, for example, and electricity generation, and these are strategic assets that may not be available to privatize, for example.
And yet, his chief economic guru at the moment seems to be someone who is very much in favour of
very
privatization.
University of Chicago trained gentleman, Paulo Guedes, who is very keen to privatize pretty much everything if he can. He and the economic nationalists are going to have some tussles and compromises there, and it's as we say, it's a relatively recent thing that Bolsonaro has embraced this free market approach to things. So we'll see how that works out.
And the second one on your list is something else that's relatively recent, which is his seeming embrace of the rule of law.
Well, he's been a congressman for a long time, but he does have some odd ideas about what the rule of law may consist of. He's been hostile to the Supreme Court, for example, though to be fair, he did recently slap down his son for some comments about sending soldiers to close down the Supreme Court. He has, been pretty close to saying that extrajudicial killings by police would be all right, the idea that the only good criminal is a dead one, and so forth. Investment does require the rule of law, after all, and an environment of rule of law.
Yeah.
And so the bet here is that he's not going to erode that.
So those are two big ones already, but then there's the general problem with Brazil at the moment, which is that Congress is highly fragmented.
Well, the lower house will have 30 parties. His party will be the second biggest, after the Workers' Party, which is the party that he defeated in the election. But the question is how, to what extent is he going to be able to get through some of the reforms that the country needs to address its fiscal deficit, which is a gaping hole in the country's finances. Whoever won would have to address this.
And that requires, in any parliamentary democracy, is going to require a bit of horse trading. But when you've got 30 different parties with very differing views.
The traditional way of doing this in Brazil, which is something that he actually campaigned against, was good old-fashioned establishment politics, with the horse trading and the pork barrel and the jobs in the cabinet in return for legislative favors and so forth. Now, that doesn't appear to be his approach. Certainly his rhetoric against the traditional way of doing things is against that. So that is going to make it harder to get together the votes, certainly if you want to change the constitution, as you would have to do if you were to really get to grips with the pension reform issue, for example, which is a major factor in the fiscal problems that he's going to face.
Well, like you said, there's a three big bets then that markets are seeing. Well, markets are making, so we'll have to just sit back and see which way he takes each of those.
Let's see how it goes. He takes office in the new year, and we'll see how that all goes.
Great. Thanks for that, Martin. We'll be back with more breaking views tomorrow.